Of course, it doesn't require me to say how challenging and difficult it has been for so many all around the world. And this pandemic has, I think, caused just so many loss of life and so many more difficult situations, not only with the disease, but in many different aspects. And I'm sure we will all agree that although even some sense of balance of the situation is found with the disease itself, with the pandemic itself, there are countless, numerous other challenges that will follow and which we will all have to face in this world in the future. Interestingly, as Dharma practitioners, the nature of change, impermanence, and the transitoriness of everything is a subject that we think about. That is what is taught in the teachings. And as practitioners, this is something that we keep in mind. And that's supposed to be very, very poignant and something that we have to keep in mind all the time. And we do try to do that. But I think even so, many of us tend to so very often forget about this. I think in sometimes we don't necessarily completely forget about it, but it's somewhere in the back of our mind. And we don't really meet with the reality of nature of phenomena being changed, that impermanence is happening at all times. There's always that little sort of hope that you and I will not have to experience that. Yes, of course, the change will come and everything is impermanent, but not quite right now. So with that kind of an attitude, when we hold on to things, when we try to be very, very fixated upon just holding on very tightly, not really being aware of the change and the impermanence, and then, of course, the reality being that everything is impermanent, change occurs, change happens. And when that change happens, it frustrates us so much. It creates so much anxiousness and fear and unsettledness in us. So it's quite like the habit of holding your fist very tightly. And if you grab a fistful of sand and you really tighten your grasp and you feel each grain of the sand slip past your fist, and it just keeps slipping, and you're left with nothing but just the fear and the the resistance to what is happening. You tend to tense up, you tend to really tighten it even more and more. So I think in many ways that happens. Change and impermanence is the nature and the reality of everything, and everything changes moment to moment. Everything is changing, everything is impermanent. But when we try to still sustain this unrealistic hope that it won't happen quite right now, that if I don't think about it, maybe it won't happen right now, or that it happens, but not in the way that, will be something that I will meet directly with it. So, of course, the fear is always there. And when the change does happen, and big changes happen, and shifts happen, and things really move on to being something that is very unpredictable and something that we are not really prepared about, then inevitably the fear and the anxiousness and the unsettledness and the irritability does increase. And I think it creates a very deep frustration for many of us. Some of us will tend to just be utterly frustrated and feel very hopeless, and that increases the restlessness and unsettledness and the anxiety within us. Some people have, again, the habit of just trying to shift and move on to something else that they think is probably going to not change. So from one change which you find difficult to really meet with, you tend to look at something else that you think is going to be more permanent than this situation. It's a very, very tricky kind of a thing where then people just will be in a denial of some sorts and then think that, well, this is changing, this is shifting, I'm very uncomfortable with this, maybe I should go there, maybe I should relate to that. That looks more permanent, or that looks something that is going to give me a sense of security. So in doing so, then I think you just prolong the problem in many ways. Of course, change has always occurred. The world has seen, whether it is the great world wars and the many changes that have happened after that, whether it is, of course, all the different kinds of pandemics and that which has changed the world, and not only in bad ways, but industrial revolution and how many changes happened after that. And also many different scientific inventions and how things changed after that. So when that change happens, what it does devour is what we are familiar with, how we live life, people we are familiar with, systems we are familiar with, the way we do things. And we tend to really fixate upon them. And in our tendency to not really meet face to face with the reality of impermanence, we latch on to things that in their sort of disguise of being familiar, we think that that's going to be more permanent in nature. So I would like to take this opportunity to encourage all of you to, as much as possible, turn your mind back to reflecting deeply on the teachings, especially the truth of impermanence and change. And instead of tensing up, becoming frustrated, and sort of feeling a sense of loss, to realize, to channel this energy of seeing the nature of impermanence into further strengthening your connection to the Dharma. So transforming adverse circumstances, always what is difficult and what you learn from your own direct experiences of life in samsara, to be able to, with awareness and discriminating wisdom that sees clearly things as they are, and allowing that to fuel and create a much more powerful sense of awakeness, that which then strengthens your connection to the Dharma and gives more meaning to your practice. This is, I think, very, very important. And I hope that, and I encourage each one of you to do this. Now, I think it is with that, keeping that in mind, one of the topics that I have been asked to speak to you is about transforming suffering into happiness, one of the wonderful teachings of Dodrupchen Jigme Tenpa Nyingma's teachings, which is, I think, available and wonderfully translated in the Lotsawa Translators Archive, which you can all refer to. I have been asked, Mauro and the Rigpa International people, the Vision Board people have asked me to speak about that first, and so I will begin to just share some of my thoughts about it. It's a wonderful text, and it's wonderfully translated, and it's very clear. So there's, I think, you can just read through it, and that itself is very clear. But even so, just because it is something that we all need to benefit and reflect upon, I'll be very happy to share that with you all.